Hi everyone, I am here today filming my first book review of 2016, and today I would like to discuss I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. So I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith is a kind of classic. It's maybe not like one of the classics that are usually talked about when people talk about classics, but I think it's definitely a classic. It was written around the 1930s or 1940s, I'm not very sure. But yeah, I kind of have a very strange personal history with this book. I've had various failed attempts at reading this book. I've had my Spanish copy of I Capture the Castle for many years. And last year, I finally decided I wanted to pick it up because I had seen a lot of people talk very highly about it. And so I finally picked it up. I started reading it. At first, I was very enchanted by it, but I reached page 100 or so, probably, and then I sort of felt, oh, well, I was liking it, but it was not very much my cup of tea. I was kind of losing interest. And suddenly I got very sick for almost, well, more than a month. And I was so sick that, I just forgot about the entire thing. I forgot about the book, and I just never picked it up again. So honestly, I felt I'm never going to read I Capture the Castle after all. So that happened a year ago. And then one day, not so long ago, I was roaming Amazon.com, as it very often happens, and I saw an English copy of I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. And I thought to myself, well, what if I tried reading it in English? I usually read everything in English if I can, but somehow it had never crossed my mind that I had to read this book, or that I should read this book in English in its original language. So I thought maybe my problem with I Capture the Castle was the Spanish translation. And I said, what the heck? I'm going to try and reread it again. Or, well, I'm going to try again to read it. So I bought an English copy of the book, and I read it this first week of 2016. And now that I've read it, I'm here to give you my thoughts, my opinion, and some of the things that I have reflected upon, and that have some things that have just popped out in my head because of this book. But before, I think I should give you like a very brief overview of the plot of this book in case you have no idea what it is about. Well, in I Capture the Castle, we follow the story of the Mortmain family. But more particularly, we follow the story of Cassandra Mortmain, who is our protagonist and our narrator. So, this book is told basically in diary format. We read Cassandra's diary entries through the course of 6 months, I believe, 5 or 6 months, as she writes in these lovely journals to teach herself how to write better and how to let her ideas just flow better and easily and much more easily. So it's a wonderful story from right there, from that part, because it's a story told in the first person of Cassandra, who is a 17-year-old girl. And well, the Mortmain family is a family that what the father, I forgot his name now, but the father was a writer, and he wrote a book called Jacob Wrestling, and it was a huge success, particularly in America, where it was very highly regarded and everyone studied it at college and whatnot. So the family survived and thrived on that success from that book. But then there were some incidents. The mother dies, the father suffered some kind of breakdown, and he was imprisoned for a couple of months. And after that, things have just never been the same for the Mortmain family. They moved to the English countryside. The mother dies later, and the father just locks himself up in one of the rooms upstairs, and no one pretty much hears about him all day long. He just spends his hours there alone, almost in solitary confinement. No one knows what he's doing. If he is reading, well, we know that he reads mystery novels, but he doesn't seem to be producing anything. He's just kind of wasting his life away. He is a very eccentric character, not a very likable character, but at the same time, he is very likable. He's very funny and weird and eccentric. So Cassandra is 17 years old. She has another sister who's older. Her name is Rose, and she's kind of a depressed kind of lady because she knows that they're just the family is in such a hard situation. And then they have a younger sibling whose name is Thomas, and Thomas goes to school, so for the vast majority of the day he's not there with them. They live in this house that is attached to a castle in the English countryside. The castle is kind of falling in ruins, and the castle, the house as well, the house that they live in is kind of empty and cold, and Cassandra does a wonderful job, or rather Dodie Smith does a wonderful job of depicting and describing a very empty, vacant, cold, um, just empty kind of space and atmosphere. So it's a very atmospheric book. And I think those things of emptiness, those qualities really reflect Cassandra's feelings and Cassandra's interior world and the way that she feels that her family is kind of falling apart, that her father is kind of dying in a way, at least intellectually, that the money is running out and they're living in very hard conditions. They barely eat anything, and they're always very cold and they suffer greatly. So the mother died, and they have a stepmother who is one of my favorite characters from the book. Her name is Topaz. She's younger than their father, and Topaz is another very eccentric character. She is a former model and actress. Yeah, she's a former model and actress, and she is just a very colorful character, very histrionic. She likes to show off, she likes to speak in a very kind of sexy, dramatic voice. And Dodie Smith puts in these descriptions of her voice that I found hilarious. And that she would maybe say this phrase this way, but then a much more dramatic phrase she would say with a contralto voice. And a contralto voice is a very dark, a very low kind of voice. And so the way that Dodie Smith makes Cassandra capture their family and their interactions is just delightful. And actually, if I could find a word that describes this entire book for me, that would be it. Delightful. This is a delightful book. I had so much fun, although I should say, this is not necessarily my type of read. You know that I tend to prefer books that have a lot of action or that have a lot of like something that makes them very gripping and I love page turners and books that you just can't put down. And this is not that kind of book necessarily. I did read it fairly quickly, but there were some moments where the tone of the book was much slower and much more depressing and much more nostalgic, and it was just it was a slower kind of read, but that's fine. It was just equally delightful. Something that I really loved about, well, no, before I say that, I forgot to mention some characters. Um, there's another character called Stephen who is a servant to the family, pretty much, but he feels as part of the family, and he is very important to the story. I'm not going to tell you why, but there is some sort of love triangle going on, which is very interesting. There is a point at the beginning of the novel, or very close to the beginning of the novel, that turns the action on. It's like a pivot point. And it's a moment where Neil and Simon Cotton come into the picture. Neil and Simon Cotton are two American young gentlemen siblings, and they have come to this castle where the Morgan family live to claim their inheritance, which is the castle and the complete estate. So these two young American, uh, mysterious, respectable, well-mannered, and well-educated gentlemen come into the picture, and of course, as it happens, they shake everything off and they just turn everything upside down. And it's a very interesting story from there. Everything happens. Like I said, there's a love triangle, so you should expect a love story here or some sort of romance, but it's not the most easy, or it's not the easiest or prettiest kind of romance. It has a lot more drama in it, and it's a very interesting story. So even though it is a slower kind of read, I was always very interested in what was going to happen. If this character was going to end up with that character, or if this character was going to do something to stop these two people from getting together, or what was going to happen. Um, the thing that I loved the most about I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith is the writing style, the narrative style, the way that Dodie Smith writes Cassandra writing the diary is wonderful. It's just magical, and it's nothing short of genius. She really manages to, I mean, Dodie Smith really manages to convey the idea and the feeling, the genuine feeling that a teenager is writing. You feel Cassandra's conflicts and feelings and mood swings and everything just flowing directly through her pen and into the journal that we are supposed to be reading. There are, like I said before, some parts of the book that feel very heavy and very slow and very depressing because Cassandra herself is feeling that way, and so she writes with a lot of guilt and with a lot of resentment and with many other difficult feelings. On the other hand, there are many moments in the book that feel very light and fluffy and warm, and Cassandra has just the most hilarious and witty comments about her family members. And this was a book that made me laugh out loud in front of people. This is a book that just cracked me up. It was very, very, very funny. And I really appreciated Dodie Smith's writing and the way that she managed to very directly and very honestly just convey her Cassandra's feelings through her writing and uh, make them get through to me as a reader. So that was a wonderful experience. And this book is in a way an examination of family relations, of cultural clash. Also, another thing that I loved about this book was obviously the characters. I thought that Dodie Smith writes the most amazing, vivid, colorful, funny, nostalgic characters. They are, I mean, I loved, there's a part at the ending of the book where, this is not a spoiler, but the younger brother, Thomas, and Cassandra trap their father in a tower, and it's honestly one of the most hilarious things I've ever read in my life. I was laughing out loud for the entire chapter. The father is ridiculously funny. Topaz is so eccentric and funny. There's a whole variety of characters that will make you have a great time, and they are very much in my heart, so you will be very attached to them. And finally, I would just like to comment again on the setting and the sense of atmosphere that Dodie Smith creates. It's a wonderfully atmospheric experience, and it really mirrors everything that Cassandra is feeling as well, and that the characters are feeling. So even though I am not one of the most interested people in reading classics, I am guilty of that. I Capture the Castle really has made me curious about classics, and I would like to ask you, if you have read classics, which classics do you think would be a suitable recommendation for me? Which classics do you think I could start with? I've only read a couple of classics in my life, like Crime and Punishment or Frankenstein or well, I cannot even think of many, but I'm not a very huge classic reader, and I really want to start reading more classics because this kind of experience was new to me with I Capture the Castle, and I was absolutely madly in love with it. This is a book that I gave 4 stars to because it was so great, and I really cannot wait until I read something like this again. So if you have any recommendations or any thoughts, ideas on what I can read that resembles this or any other classic, even if it's very different from I Capture the Castle, but that would hold my interest and that would help me get into more classics, then please let me know in the comments down below. As always, thank you very much for watching. I will see you on the next video.